Hey everybody, welcome back to the vlog and thank you for joining me for tea time. So today we're going to be taking a look at the Canon EOS R as well as the Nikon Z6 specs and try to figure out what is the best camera for you and your photographic needs. So before I get into it, I want to ask that you head over to my website, JCristina.com. Check it out. I've invented some tools over the years, and if there's something there you like, pick it up and support me. That would be awesome. So guys, this weekend was really monumental for me specific. And what had happened was I hit 10,000 subs. So even though I've only been doing this for a year and a half, and prior to this, I was doing the Digital Photography Cafe show with Trevor Current for about 6 or 7 years, on my own, 10,000 subs means a lot. Now, I know there's a lot of other channels out there with 100,000, 500,000, a million subscribers, but the amount of interaction I get out of 10,000 people is just amazing. And that's just thanks to you guys. As always, many blessings to you. Thank you so much for being here with me every week. Now, I have to say also that with my 10,000 subs, my son, my little guy, made me that. A 10,000 sub play button out of Legos, all right? It's awesome, and it's going to stay there for a bit. Anyways, guys, so let's get right into it. Nikon versus Canon. Let's not make this into anything nasty. We're going to look spec for spec and just see what works out better for your specific business. So let's get right into it. Now, looking at specs, I know specs are boring, but we have to start out with the specs to get an idea to which works better for you. Now, megapixels, we have the EOS R with 30 megapixels and Nikon Z6 with 25 megapixels. Not bad, about 5 megapixels more on the Canon side. Lens mount, 54 millimeters to 55 millimeters on the Nikon side. Now ISO goes from 100 to 40,000 on Canon side, whereas on Nikon it does 100 to 51,200. Exposure compensation, Canon does plus minus 3 EV, whereas Nikon will do plus minus 5 EV. Card slots, both only one card slot, guys. This has been just the bane of Canon and Nikon. It just, anyways, one card slot, an SD card slot in the Canon and a XQD card slot in the Nikon. Now the mount adapter, they both require one to use previous lenses. The Canon will allow both EF as well as EFS lenses, but not EFM lenses, whereas the Nikon adapter will allow you to use all F lenses. Next, Ibis. No Ibis on the Canon and 5-axis of in-body image stabilization on the Nikon. Only 3-axis if you're going to be using older glass, but still it does have Ibis, whereas Canon does not. AF points. Canon has 5,655 AF points. I don't even know how that's even possible, but that's what we're getting with the spec sheet. And Nikon has 273 points. Next is shutter speed, and they both will do 1/8,000th of a second up to 30 seconds of exposure. The rear panel on both of them is 2.1 million dots, and they're both touch screens. What differs is on the Canon, you have a fully articulating back panel that will flip forward, whereas on the Nikon, you're only getting a flippy screen, and not a full flippy screen at that. They both will have that top LCD, let's call it the e-ink, which will give you additional information on the top of the camera. They both will have an EVF coverage of 100% and with an EVF magnification of 0.7 on the Canon and 0.8 on the Nikon. As far as video goes, they'll both shoot 4K at 30 frames per second. Why? Anyways, neither of them will do 60. 4K at 30 frames per second for both, and at 1080p, they both will do 60 frames per second, both Nikon and Canon. And finally, at 720p or standard HD, Canon will give you 120 frames per second for slow-mo, whereas that is not available as far as to my knowledge for the Nikon. So no slow-mo on the Nikon. Moving into the video or high-end video, 10-bit 422 is available with the Nikon, but not with the Canon. The only caveat is if you want to get that type of high res and high capacity, high data rate, you're going to have to record it to an external video recorder, whereas Canon does not have that. Next, USB charging is available on both. Now, as far as battery life, the Canon will provide 560 shots, whereas the Nikon only 330. Now, it is my understanding that some of reviewers of the Z6 were able to get more than 330, but we can only go by the specs that are on Nikon's spec sheet. Now, as far as GPS, I believe that the Canon EOS R will have GPS because it is in the list of available information or data that is on the screen. So it most likely will have GPS, whereas the Nikon Z6 does not for sure. Now, weight. 660 grams on the Canon side, 675 grams on the Nikon side. Basically equal. So now to sum these specs up just a little bit, you have Canon takes a win with megapixels for sure. I would call it a draw when it comes to lens mount. You have 54 millimeters versus 55 millimeters is not really that big of a difference. Now Nikon takes the win with ISO, providing an extra 2 stops of exposure compensation while topping out at 51,200 ISO in comparison to only 40,000. That is not extended. Next, we have a draw between Nikon and Canon when it comes to card slots. They both only have one card slot. So I would say that neither of these are, to me, professional cameras. One with an SD card, the other one with an XQD. Throw it up in the air, whichever one you like is fine. Next, we have Canon taking the win for AF points. We have 5,655 versus 273. We have Nikon taking the win with Ibis, where Canon does not have in-body image stabilization, whereas Nikon does. Next, we have Canon taking the win for a fully articulated back screen, whereas, like I said earlier, Nikon only has that flippy screen, and it doesn't actually flip even all the way at 90 degrees, which is a problem. Now, Nikon takes the win for the 4K that it provides at 10-bit 422, whereas Canon does not have that functionality. And once again, Nikon takes the win for continuous drive at 12 FPS, whereas Canon only gets you up to 8 FPS. Next, Canon takes the win for battery life for sure at 560 shots, whereas Nikon is sitting at 330 as of right now, as of this recording. Also, Canon takes another win with slow-mo, whereas Nikon does not provide slow-mo at all according to the spec sheets, whereas Canon will provide it under HD standard mode. Canon once again also takes the win under AF tracking. Number one, it provides dual pixel AF, which is definitely by far the best that's currently on the market, as well as going all the way down to a -6 EV when it comes to tracking, and that is once again at 5,655 points. Not bad. Canon also takes a win for a battery grip. Why? Because they have one, and it actually has controls on it. It can be switched over to vertical mode, and if you're a portrait shooter, you can use that battery grip to take photos, whereas Nikon only has a battery brick. That means it is only going to give you an extra couple of batteries, but you can't flip it over. You still have to do this kind of thing. Not good at all. Canon also takes a win under GPS because it's my understanding that it will have GPS in this camera because the specs, like I say, show that GPS information will be provided, whereas Nikon for sure does not have GPS. So, all in all, where does this sit? Well, let me first start out by saying that Nikon did a fantastic job at all of the advertising that came just before the announcement. They did like a month of pushing. Now, the advertising wasn't bad, but I think that it might have got them to a spot where there was a point of no return, where people expected all this and then got this, all right? Whereas Canon this time did not do any advertising. They're literally going to make an announcement in 2 days, and I haven't even seen a single video. No, nothing. No promotional video, nothing. No teaser, nothing at all, which is, I guess, good and bad. It's kind of Canon-esque, right, guys? They just release, and that's it. And I guess they feel just entitled that everyone's just going to buy their camera. I don't know. I really don't know what it is, but I guess no advertising or a ton of advertising, building expectation or just leaving expectations where they are. So for me, I think that if you are a guy that needs tracking and a ton of AF points, all the way down to -6 EV, and you need a fully articulating back panel to point towards like your subject, if you're like, for example, a YouTuber, and I think that the Canon EOS R will be a YouTuber's dream, as long as you don't mind shooting 4K at 30 frames per second and not 60. I think it is amazing for that, especially at the price point. Now, if you need something that's going to have image stabilization in it, all right, then Nikon is definitely where you need to be, because it does provide 5-axis of image stabilization. And if you use older glass that doesn't have image stabilization, it will provide it within the camera. 3 stops instead of 5, but that's still better than nothing, right? If image stabilization is for you, then definitely Nikon is your bag. Now, I think looking at these cameras together, I think that both Nikon and Canon failed. All right, I think that they failed because of different reasons, but they both failed in comparison to what Sony is doing. All right, did they do good enough? And is that what they were looking to do and hit the consumer market? I think the answer to that, however, is correct. Why is it correct? Well, because I don't believe that anyone is going to leave in droves anymore from Nikon over to Sony. And I don't think anyone's going to leave anymore from Canon over to Sony. I think what they've produced is good enough for the mirrorless market as of today. Is it stellar? No. Is it monumental? No. They're both mediocre at best. But currently, guys, we live in an age of mediocrity, right? No one is making anything stellar. Everyone holds back. That's what I see has been going on in the photographic area for quite a number of years now. They get just to a certain point, especially Canon, and then they just botch it up, all right? Nikon here could have really knocked it out of the park, and they left stuff out of the camera. You have Sony not having to worry about cannibalizing any of their past cameras, can just keep on just chugging along, doing what they want, and not have to worry about holding anything back because they're not going to cannibalize anything else, right, guys? So as it stands right now, I think that there is reasons to go Canon and reasons to go Nikon. If you are currently a Nikon shooter, there's no reason to go Canon and there's no reason to go Sony. If you're currently a Canon shooter, there's no reason to go Nikon and there's no reason to go Sony for the most part. So kind of throw it up. I think that out of the wins that we tallied here, I think the Canon came up with a few more wins than Nikon. But remember, real world is everything, guys. Wins when it comes to spec sheet means this much, right? Real world reviews mean this much, and not reviews from shills and other people that are internal to the companies, Canon or Nikon, because we'll get plenty of those reviews also. I want to see real world reviews from real people, right? So that's really about it. That's what I got for you today. I hope that you enjoyed the content as always. If you have, please throw me a big thumbs up. That would be stellar. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you can get all my content when it becomes available, and click the bell icon so when it is available, you will be notified of it. And finally, head over to my website, JCristina.com, where you can find all the photography tools I've invented for you and me over the years, and hopefully there's something there that you might like. And if there is, please pick it up and support me. That's it, guys. Once again, thank you so much for those 10,000 subs. I appreciate it. I will be here for the next 10. Take care, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.